Hello, everybody. I'm Chris Williams, and welcome to the Scumdog's Kennel. I have another great show planned for us. We're going to be looking at weird UFO stories tonight. Just more of them, having some more fun. But first, while we wait for people to gather in the chat, let me go off and sew some artwork off from my own upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs. Okay? Let me go over here and go to share screen. Here we go. Here is my extreme 90s cover. This cover I did to harken back to the comic books of the 90s. Looks pretty good. The name of my graphic novel is Scumdogs. It's a parody book. I parody cartoons we grew up with when we were kids, the cartoons we watched when we were young. Now, the Scumdogs themselves, well, they're supervillains out to take over the world. They're basically a parody of villains you'd see on Saturday, back in the 80s and stuff. Let's see. You know that. See, the story of them is that, well, in the future, there's such a thing known as the Scumdogs Sports. It's basically sporting events held with superhuman monsters as the athletes. See, they're called scum and dogs because they trade in their humanity for money. See, to compete in these events, you have to be a superhumanly powerful monster, so they transform themselves into the superhumanly powerful beasts. Either through science or through some other means, they become superhumanly powerful. So not exactly the nicest bunch of guys around. Think of today's athletes, only give them superpowers. But what happens when these guys get banned from sports? Well, the Scumdogs try and take over the world. They continue calling themselves the Scumdogs and try to take over the universe. The main characters are Deathmug and Buick Starpoon. Deathmug is a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. He's the purple guy with the metal mask over there, fighting his archenemy Buick Starpoon, the guy with the pink pompadour hair and the green and white uniform. Deathmug is an arrogant, overbearing guy who wants to rule the universe. His ego is so big it's almost as big as Buick Starpoon's. It's just one of the reasons why they hate each other. Deathmug has various aspects from villains from 80s cartoons, like say Cobra Commander and Serpentor, the leaders of Cobra from G.I. Joe, the cartoon, the leaders of Cobra. He's got a metal mask like Cobra Commander, and he's got gold on him like Serpentor, and he's purple like the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While Buick Starpoon, the guy with the pink pompadour hair, he's a G.I. Joe parody, but he's also a parody of space hero kinds of characters like Captain Kirk, Captain Kirk, Buzz Lightyear, or Buck Rogers. He's a parody of those guys. But because he's a G.I. Joe parody, and in fact, anyone wearing a similar uniform to Buick Starpoon on this cover is part of his team in the Space Forces. But because he's a G.I. Joe parody and the rest of his team are G.I. Joe parodies, they each have a military specialty. Buick Starpoon's is that he's part of the military. While this guy with the mohawk over here, his name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he's an army guy before he joined the Space Forces. While this bald guy with the gun down here in the blue uniform is Beach Pounder. His name is Beach Pounder. His military specialty is that he's a Marine. Well, this guy back here in the red uniform driving that vehicle and stuff like that, his name is Blast Tank. His military specialty is that he's a heavy vehicle specialist, a tanker. So you get the idea. Looks pretty good. Now, this is one of 3 different variant covers you'll be able to back when Indiegogo goes live. It's not live yet. I'm just telling you. By the way, hit that like button for me. Right. Here's Girl Friday. She's Buick Starpoon's second in command on the Wild Rangers. That's the name of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me, as well as please share this video out on social media. Share it out on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. Now, Girl Friday, she was assigned to the Wild Rangers as Buick Starpoon's second in command because while the Wild Rangers go out and save the universe from the Scumdogs, they're just highly destructive idiots. So her superiors basically put Girl Friday there as Buick Starpoon's second in command to basically babysit them and make sure they do their jobs right. And she hates her career now. Well, she hates Buick Starpoon because she thinks her career in the military is over and because she's a babysitter. That's Girl Friday. Here's Deathmug's henchman, because in all 80s cartoons, the main villain of the cartoon would have henchmen, and these are my henchmen. Let's see. The name of the blue guy with the top hat is Murder Mouth. And the pink guy down here is Sloppy. There are a couple of idiots that can't possibly do anything right, and they destroy everything they touch. Come and read about them when my Indiegogo goes live. Here's Hair Metal Doctor. Hair Metal Doctor is a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe, a mad scientist. But my mad scientist here is also a hair metal musician, because I thought that'd be awesome to have as a villain. He thinks of all the mad gadgets and machines the scumdogs use to try and take over the world. Come read about him when my Indiegogo goes live. It's Hair Metal Doctor. And here we have Miss Breasty Melons. Miss Breasty Melons is a parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe. But unlike the Baroness, she's a party girl who just wants to have fun. She became a villain because she thought she just did it for fun. Come and read about her and stuff. Now, the Hair Metal Doctor pinup and the Miss Breasty Melons pinup will be included within my graphic novel with other pinups when you back it on Indiegogo. It's not live yet, so you have to wait. You have to wait a bit longer, but you can also, or you will be able to buy these pinups on T-shirts from Crypto Fashion as soon as I'm able to make them. I haven't made them yet, but I'm just telling you what I have planned. There, we looked at that. Let's exit out of these. Bianca Fights the Zombies. Dude, hello, Bianca Fights the Zombies. Thank you for checking in the Scumdogs Kennel. We're going to be looking at UFO stories tonight, a bit more of them and stuff. So let me go over here. And we'll look at a few UFO stories. Let me do that. Let's see. The Deadly Cross Mountain UFO encounter. We'll take a look at this one. There we go. This right here. Get this right here up. And we'll have some fun. We'll see who's watching us. Hit that like button, folks, if you have not yet. Please do so. It helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please hit that bell. Rather, maybe we should say this. Please hit that like button. It helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please hit that bell. Hit the part of the bell that gives you all future notifications, as well as please go and share this video out on social media. Share it out anywhere. Let's get to this article. Although officially the incident 12th, 1954 is a tragic plane crash that resulted in the death of a young pilot, there's plenty of evidence and witness testimony to suggest that the crash was caused by an unknown object, a UFO. What's more, if true, the incident would be more of an apparent small collection of such Air Force fatalities. Remember, only months earlier, in November 1953, was the Kinross Air Force Base incident, which would result in the death of 2 serving U.S. pilots. What's more, the incident occurred during the particularly heavy wave of UFO sightings, as well as one of the most controversial and admittedly alleged incidents of the time, the meeting between President Eisenhower and at least 2 different alien races. All right. Perhaps strange then that the incident in question is not well known as we might expect, given the tragic circumstances which surround it. This is a purposeful attempt to downplay it? Well, the case itself may be widely known. Many of us will have seen the location previously, perhaps, without even realizing, as it was used as a backdrop to the climax of 2-part UFO X-Files episode from the 2nd season entitled Ascension, which culminates in the presumed alien abduction of Agent Diana Scully after she herself is abducted by a reported abductee, Dwayne. The picturesque scenery of Gross Mountain, complete with Ascend to the Stars gondola, provides the backdrop for the episode's final frantic minutes. In reality, though, we shall see the scene was once the location of a very real and tragic event. Before we examine the 54 incident, you can check out the trailer to the aforementioned, show. The tragic instrument checking exercise. On the gray, dull morning of 12th February 1954 at around 10:30 a.m., Second Lieutenant Lamar Barlow was piloting his F-86 Saberjet over the North Shore Mountains and especially Gross Mountain in British Columbia, Canada. Early that morning, Barlow had left the runway from Crowd Air Force Base over the state border in Tacoma, in Washington. Washington. Although the jet was fully armed, the flight was simply a standard instrument checking exercise. However, shortly after, I might have read this story before, but this seems to be a more detailed account of what happened. Let's just read into it, see what all we can learn about it. 12 noon, the control tower began receiving mayday calls from Barlow. According to the report, he had lost the use of his compass and coincidentally was now lost himself. Records from Curd Air Force Base that at 12:06 p.m., Barlow was approximately 60 miles north of Vancouver. 9 minutes later, and with the aid of radar operators, the distance was reduced to only 15 miles. By this time, however, the F-86 was beginning to run remarkably low on fuel. Preparations made for an emergency landing at Vancouver's Sea Island Airport before permission to land was granted. All communications were lost. We will examine the speculative circumstances in a moment, as what exactly followed this loss of communication is unclear, and certainly the speculation is not part of the official version of events. However, at an altitude of 2,700 feet and at a speed of over 7,000 miles per hour, Barlow still strapped firmly into his seat. That's interesting, huh, folks? What do you think about it? Leave me a few chats. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Not bad. I should probably look at Indiegogo real quick before we go onward. I wanted to take a look at this. Any new stories? Viking Wolf has made quite a bit of money. Alien Alamos made $81,560. Looks pretty good. Not too bad. Let me do this real quick. Go over here. Let's see. Not too bad. Let's do this. Okay, not too bad. Just trying to see if there's any new Indiegogos. Anything down here? Not too bad. Stomp 2 comic book has made $5,600 some dollars. Not too bad. Okay, let's get back to that UFO story. I just wanted to take a quick look. And let's see. Not too bad. Hit that. If you have not yet, folks, please hit that like button for me. However, an altitude 250 miles per hour step firmly, which is how military recovery teams found his body slammed squarely into the mountainside. Debris would fly to all directions and travel a considerable distance. Official explanation: pilot error, radar ghost. Several days later, accounts began to appear in newspapers locally and nationally. The cause of the crash, according to the United Air Force, was a pilot error. Barlow, they said, was seeing radar ghosts. This, combined with the loss of his navigation equipment, confused the pilot, who believed he was nearer to Kukuma than he actually was. When mountains suddenly came into view, given the speed at which he was traveling, the pilot simply had no time to react. I sounded enough explanation, however, to some official explanation didn't add up. Not least why he was traveling so fast while descending in the first place. While the military chalked this up to experience or lack thereof on Barlow's part, it was an aspect of the case, like many others, that nigged at the minds of many UFO researchers. Yeah, minds of many. For example, why was the plane carrying 24 fully armed rockets on what was essentially a training exercise? Although skeptics to the UFO claims, which we will get to in a moment, point out that this produced the realistic weight of a plane should it be heading into combat. This would appear to be something achievable without using fully armed weaponry, certainly not with an inexperienced pilot, if we accept for a moment the U.S. Air Force claims regarding Barlow and his error causing the crash. Furthermore, the entire area was roped off and protected by guards 24 hours a day for several days after the incident. Officially and understandably, this was to retrieve most of the 24 rockets in question. Whether that is an honest assessment or not, it certainly provided an ample reason for the military to shield the activities of the crash site from the public. Was Lamar Barlow on a secret armed intercept mission? Returning to the question why F-86 was armed, some researchers believe the reason to be for far more serious than a mere test, even sinister according to some who have studied the researched the Gross Mountain incident. Barlow's mission that morning was not to check onboard instruments. According to some researchers, he felt the runway that gray morning was orders to pursue and intercept a UFO with deadly force if necessary. And a quick side thought here, all reported parts concerning the cleanup operation following the crash mentioned that most of the rockets were retrieved. Many there still be missing from the FA-6 somewhere in the woodlands of Gross Mountain, or might it be that one or more of the rockets were discharged during the 2 hours or so that Barlow was in the air again? While that is pure speculation, it's certainly worth keeping in mind. Especially when we know the radar echoes that remain unexplained even to today, well as the sudden failure of all instruments and communications from other similar reports. And if we accept for a moment their authenticity, it would appear such a response of jamming and freezing such technical instruments is very much yeah. I don't think I've ever read the story before, so we've got a good one here going on, huh, folks? Very much a defensive measure by these strange crafts. Was this mystery radar phantom echo of the UFO in question, and did Barlow fire upon it, so provoking such a response? Perhaps this is why the pilot was so far off course and out of the United States airspace in the first place. It is perhaps worth mentioning that the United States Air Force at the time of the incident would often use the phrase phantom radar echo to describe any aerial anomaly, what we would call today a UFO. Circumstantial evidence suggests an active pursuit mission. If Barlow was on an intercept mission that fateful morning, it is perhaps understandable and even expect that the U.S. Air Force would keep the details of that mission secret. This leads us through to us just what the pilot chasing. UFO researcher Gord Health makes some intriguing and balanced, convincing proposals to what happened over Gross Mountain that morning. Interesting. For example, he asked why the pilot was allowed to stray so far, of course, across the border into Canada without radar control alerting him to the fact. Remember, according to the report, it only became apparent that Barlow was so far off course when he himself issued a Mayday call following the apparent malfunction of this navigation instrument. Of course, if Barlow, with radar control and full knowledge, was pursuing an unknown craft, then those actions of radar control would make sense. Let's see this part here. Which makes more sense? The radar operators ignored the jet flying in Canadian airspace until the pilot suddenly realizes he was only 30 minutes of fuel. And no clue about his position, or the radar operators guided the pilot in pursuit of a UFO into Canadian airspace beyond the furthest distance to return to base, thinking the pilot would be able to land safely at Vancouver. As you might imagine, we will likely, like many researchers agree that his questioning is certainly more likely, particularly affecting the alertness with which the United States air military was kept throughout the early years of the Cold War, without such lapses of judgment as the former pilot held that scenario is highly unlikely. Furthermore, the sheer speed with which the planes descended was at odds with a typical approach for landing emergency or not. Only witnesses 6-year-old Robin. 6-year-old Robin, huh? And he twisted that makes the incident sound even more like a blockbuster movie. The only witness was a 6-year-old schoolgirl who was returning home from school for lunch break. Robin McPherson would tell newspaper reporters that she was almost directly in line with a skylift. That F-86 jet was only just missed as it approached the mountain. She would tell how the plane was awful low and that it would come out of the clouds trailing very fast. She would then continue. Then it sort of zoomed up and went to the trees to the side of the mountain. I didn't hear any noise like a bang. In the same newspaper story, military spokesman wondered why the pilot had not bailed out, which was the usual procedure. Sledgehammer quote noted how Barlow was flying as blind as a bat. Here's a picture of the little girl, Robin and stuff like that. There certainly seems to have been no hesitancy to pass the blame squarely on the fate of the recently deceased pilot by the military. The fact that there was no description to the object, if indeed a UFO was present, that morning makes it impossible to pair with other sightings. However, the state of Washington, United States, and British Columbia and Canada have long histories of UFO activity, with many reports occurring around the time of the fateful Goose Mountain crash. The oncoming abundance of UFO encounters. There would be a literal wave of UFO sightings across the entire planet in the weeks following the Grouse Mountain incident, and there are undoubtedly some that will share connections to the above incident. For example, in the evening of 20th March 1954, around 6 weeks following the fatal F-86 crash into Grouse Mountain, 5 witnesses would report several mysterious lights over the town of Summer. As the witnesses drove along, however, the lights would come together and then descend upon their vehicle. As it did so, one of the witnesses claimed to see a human figure encased in the orb-like light, as if it was some kind of futuristic, incomprehensible vehicle. Then the light and the humanoid vanished. One incident, however, stands out more than the rest, not just because it took place over two separate airspace bases as the Grand Mountain crash, but it demonstrated an apparent knowledge of the aviation procedure of the United States, the correct IFF response incident. Shortly after 8 p.m. on the 21st June 54, radars from the state of Washington, from Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada would pick up an identified object on their systems. The radar system would automatically ask who the object was, essentially questioning their IFF code. Quite certain the object was not a United States aircraft, the control tower was collectively shocked when 8:24 p.m. a response came back, and what's more, the code it offered was indeed the correct one. Making the encounter even more concerning was the fact that the object, or whatever the intelligence was behind it, would it respond with several more correct and appropriate codes. This was something not lost on those in the 3 different control towers currently tracking the strange and unknown object. If those that were indeed the UFOs increasingly witnessed around the United States had, to such secret codes, yeah. It meant that the air defense was essentially ineffective and airspace could be breached easily. If that's if the UFOs had, witnessed around the head. Yeah, if the UFOs had knowledge of such secret codes, if they had knowledge of these secret codes the US was using and stuff, it'd be useless, wouldn't it? That's what they were thinking and stuff. Could be. Well, maybe not. Making the incident even more unnerving when the F-86 jets were sent to intercept the object. The anomaly would split into 2 and perform maneuver far beyond what the fighter could perform before finally disappearing from visual sight and radar. The total length of the encounter was 82 minutes. The sighting remains unexplained. It's perhaps interesting to note the course of action taken by the U.S. Air Force to scramble 8 F-86 fighter jets. Interesting, a local newspaper would tell of a resident report of a strange light in the sky between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on the night in question. Interestingly, a sighting earlier in the same day near Mount Vernon was described as witnesses looking like the upper half of a bubble on water. You can't see the clipping below. Several similar UFO instances of 1953. As much as there were several sightings and encounters following the Grouse Mountain incident, there were equally as many that proceeded in the state of Washington, British Columbia, and the Canadian side of the border. Almost exactly a year previously, for example, in the town of Brasilia, came another incident involving another military aircraft. Sorry if I'm basically yawning here. I'm going to keep up with this story and just a bit tired. This time at B-36, although the meeting between the 2 aerial vehicles one of chance as opposed to the B-36 being sent to intercept it. The incident occurred at around 1:30 and on the 6th of February 1953. The 36 was in flight when the crew noticed a white omnidirectional light flashing at them. At them at short but regular intervals. The crew would watch the light off between 2 to 5 minutes before attempting to turn towards it. If they did so, however, it vanished, leaving the plane to continue on with its original course. That is very interesting. Several months later, the evening of 12th May, several unidentified blips appeared on ground and controlled radars. When jet interceptors were scrambled, although they could also see the anomalies on the radar screens, none of them could confirm visual identification. Strangely, however, one particular aircraft pilot with the handle of would claim to have locked on to one of the objects on several occasions, although there was no known wreckage or recovery of such. After a little over 2 hours, the object simply vanished. The Larson Air Force Base incident, 1952. A little over a year before the Grand Mouse incident on the 22nd December 1952, in another Russian Air Force Base, Larson Air Force Base, an off-duty instrument technician would make a report of a strange object near the base. The technician in question was driving back toward the base at around 7:30 p.m. when the object became invisible through the windshield of his vehicle. He pulled the car over in order to watch the strange aerial anomaly more closely. The object would move in spurts at an angle of 45 degrees before suddenly speeding up considerably. While it was at this speed, the object appeared to glow a brilliant white, all except that is when it rolled into the air, it performed the maneuver 3 times, and on each mission, a red underside was clearly visible. Equally, at one point during these rolls, the light appeared to go out completely. This suggests the craft had 3 sides or surfaces to its exterior, one of which housed no lights at all. The object would eventually sail in the sky at a relatively high altitude. It would occasionally dart to the left or right, and then back again. Here we go. Mitch, have you ever seen a UFO, man? I saw and it was chased by a large circular craft in the late 90s in rural Australia. But driving home, it was the most terrifying bloody thing I've ever experienced. Yeah? In fact, I actually have seen a couple of UFOs. I'm not really wanting to go into them, but I have seen a couple of them. Two UFO stories I have. I could go into them, but maybe I'll save it for another time. Let's see. So this is just one of the. Thanks for sending a chat, Mitch. Feel free to leave more. I'd love to hear from you again, as well as anyone else who wants to leave chats. The object would eventually sail in the sky at a relatively high altitude. It would occasionally dart to the left or right and then back again at around 15 minutes after the object first appeared. The witness would get back into his car and drive away, simply leaving the hat-shaped object behind hanging in the air. The Mount Spokane incident. Okay, the Mount encounter. Although the exact date is uncertain, another sighting in the state of Washington in 1952 occurred in Mount Spokane. The witness, who was in the area riding on horseback, would report of a domed disc-shaped object descending and then landing in an open field near to his location. 3 metallic legs would protrude from the underside to support the weight of the disc, which had several windows around its sides. Then a sudden strong rush of wind hit the witness, while at the same time a ramp was stretching to the ground from an opening in the craft. On the ramp, 3 humanoid men appeared, each wearing a strange silver coveralls. Fair enough, I'm the only one watching, though. All right, that's fine, Mitch. But feel free to hit that like button for me, and I'll hopefully bring a few more people in. As well as please go and hit that bell and hit the notifications on the bell for all notifications for future videos, as well as please go and share this video out on social media. Then a sudden strong rush of wind hit the witness, while at the same time a ramp was stretching to the ground from an opening in the craft. On the ramp, 3 humanoid men appeared, each wearing shiny silver coveralls. The witness heard the men speak. Okay, you have earned a like. Thank you, Mitch. They didn't speak an unknown language as they seemingly discussed his presence. He would recall how they seemed to have a particular interest in the horse. The account stops there, and while it doesn't say what happened after that, we have to assume the witness vacated the area as soon as he could. Alien abduction at Park. Okay, at Defiance Park. Yet another witness of a similar nature. It happened in the summer of 1952 at Washington's Point Defiance Park, and while there is not much known of the encounter, it's certainly intriguing. It also further demonstrates an apparent extraterrestrial presence in the upper northwest corner of the United States during the early 50s. One evening in July 1952, at a little after 9 p.m., the witness, a 9-year-old boy, would report seeing a yellowish light moving around in the sky above their home. As he watched the light, he was suddenly aware of many small beings all around him. They were speaking a language he had not heard before. Right, it's interesting. The next thing he knew, he was in a bright white room. He was in a bright room, huh? He was in a sitting position on something resembling a chair. Then he was back at home. The strange light, as well as the equally strange beings, were gone. A look at the clock, however, revealed it was now after 11 p.m. Despite it in his mind, only a few minutes had passed. Sightings would unfold at the same day in Washington area. On 1st June 1952 at around 1 p.m. in Walla Walla. A former military pilot, Major Vollentorf, witnessed and reports a shiny oval object climbing extremely fast in the sky. 2 hours later on Soap Lake, Ray Lotman would report seeing 3 shiny objects, each flying perfectly straight. All right. Reports of inverted and tin-colored saucers surfaced in August 1952 over the Skylight Mountain region. According to what little information there is on the sightings, these strange crafts were darting in and out of a cloud bank and flying in a circular formation. Incidents from the Canadian side of the border. Well, while we have focused on the American side of the border in the majority of this article, we should also note some of the similar sightings from the Canadian side and around Vancouver, British Columbia. The McRoberts, Vancouver Island UFO photograph, 1981. Perhaps one of the most fascinating, if not least due to the photographic evidence, is the Vancouver Island picture, which is one of the locations of our previously mentioned 1954 IIF incident. On this particular evening at a little 6 p.m. in early October 1981, Hannah McRoberts was on vacation in Vancouver Island. During this time, she would take multiple pictures of the mountain ranges and woodlands. According to McRoberts, one specific picture she took, she noticed a strange cloud around the top of the mountain, similar to a volcano issuing steam. The rest of the group she was with didn't see anything unusual and so simply forgot the incident. This was until she had the photographs developed several weeks later. The picture soon came to the attention of UFO researchers and investigators. It would also come to the attention of members of Vancouver Macmillan Planetarium. David Powell. Powell would ultimately, through several channels, get the photograph to a UFO group in Arizona. Essentially, their investigation of the picture would ultimately lead them to believe Hannah Roberts' picture was a legitimate classical type UFO photo. One thing we take note of before moving on is the location of the McRoberts photograph. Spot relatively a stone's away from the Mount Rainier, which was the location of the famous Kenneth Arnold sign from the summer of 1947. The Vedder River story, August 80. Although the incident wasn't widely known about outside of the small circle of witnesses involved until 2011, the previous year, the Roberts picture in August 1980 came another intriguing UFO incident in the Vedder River. On this particular evening, around 7 p.m., Cynthia and her family were driving back from a camping trip when they suddenly noticed a large, dark, circular craft. They would later estimate to have been around 60 miles outside of Vancouver at the time of the sighting. Within seconds, the object was suddenly right next to the moving vehicle's right side. From her position back in the back seat while her parents were driving, the teenage Cynthia noticed the shiny metallic exterior to the craft. Even strange, she would recall how there was no visible seams, separation from the dome top to the wider bottom. It had square like edges, but also very rounded looking in appearance. As the craft moved slightly, exposed in its downside, Cynthia would recall that by comparison to the shiny exterior, the top of the craft, the bottom was very dark. Furthermore, the material appeared to be like very small squares, like a vent. Even more bizarre, while this vent-like section remained perfectly still, the outer section, which extended to the top, was spinning quickly. What is further interesting is the description and indeed the sketch of the craft, which you can see below. It looks almost identical to the signs from across the border in Washington from the 1950s, while a car driven by Cynthia's mother continued down down the highway, the UFO would suddenly move away from it. The witness did see where it went, although their last views suggested it was attempting to land on a sighting every 55 hours in the state of Washington. Before we return to the Ghost Mountain incident, we should perhaps look at some of the very recent UFO sightings. Okay, please go. By the way, folks, please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you, and please go and hit that like button for me, as well as please go and share this video on social media. While the car was driving by Cynthia's mother, continuing down the highway, the UFO would suddenly move away from them. We did see it where the witness did see where it went, although their last views of it suggested it was attempting to land. Sightings every 55 hours, Washington. Before we return to the Ghost Mountain incident, we should perhaps look at some of the very recent UFO sightings. Yeah, all right. Let's get into them. We can in Canada are similarly here on the rise. We should perhaps look at incidents in the state of Washington. And while which state has the high number of sightings depends on which source, there is no doubt that the Evergreen State continued to be hotbed of UFO activity. Perhaps lends a touch of more credibility to the picture. To the picture, huh? And while the story is blowing up on YouTube, so it might help the video get recommended if you mention it or other famous sightings from America. The story is blowing up on YouTube. Oh, if you've read the Rustell account or not, but there was a primary school in Australia that several teachers, over 200 students, witnessed through craft land at a field at school. The Rustell account, over in Australia. Right, is this a recent story? Because I heard of another story in Australia, and other stories like this, where a school saw several of these alien crafts, and they landed, and the kids saw all of this, and they've been talking about it for years. But thank you for mentioning that, Mitch. I will go over that account eventually, the Rustell account. And maybe I'll get into it tonight. 1965. I figured that was where it happened, because there was one, like, I've heard of several accounts of children at schools seeing alien spacecraft and stuff like that. So it is very similar to other stories and stuff I've heard about. But I will be looking into it. Thank you. Maybe tonight, or maybe I'll do my own dedicated video to it tomorrow. All right, let's get into this. Before we return to the Ghost Mountain incident, we have to mention that, before we return to the Ghost Mountain incident, we should perhaps look at some of the very recent sightings. And while we have mentioned previously, let's get into these stories. And while which state has the highest number of sightings depends on which sources, there is no doubt that Evergreen State continues to be a hotbed of UFO activity. This perhaps lends a touch more credibility to the plethora of sightings from the initial days of the modern UFO period. According to a recent article, in a 12-month period from January 2018 to January 2019, there were 160 reported UFO sightings in the state of Washington. Just to break this down, this translates to one sighting on average every 55 hours, or every 2 and a bit days. Then that is before we take into account the sightings that go unreported, unremembered, or even unrecognized. The sightings, according to the National UFO Reporting Center, statistics include various types of crafts and occur equally various times of the day. Some of them, however, undoubtedly sound extremely similar to those as far as we're concerned. Here with this article, the key sightings of the region of the 1950s, a continual stream of UFOs. For example, on the evening of 25th January 2018, several people in Yakima, or some state or something, several strange lights blinking on and off before 3 smaller craft arrived. 2 of these crafts, however, similar to the third one, however, began to climb at an incredible rate higher than the others. They would note how bright the object was, claiming which would be in sympathy with several comments from the sightings of the 50s. However, the strangest part of the sighting was by far when the disc-shaped object would seem to create a cloud for it to vanish behind. In April 2018, the Kitty region of the state, how witness was smoking a cigarette outside would suddenly notice a globe-like object overhead. He would later describe it as moving in a circular motion, flashing red, blue, and white and green. He would liken its object to a fireball of energy bursting repeatedly. Perhaps this a sighting that had chilling similarities to the types of intercept missions of previous decades occurred in the night of 26th May 18. On that evening, an engaged couple in the evening bike ride witnessed several objects moving in purposeful formation. Then a military-style helicopter approached the object only to turn away as if repelled. A sighting in June, almost exactly a month later, took place at the immediate vicinity of Mount St. Helens. A passenger on board a Boeing 737 reported a strange craft traveling at a 45-degree angle before dissipating into the clouds. Another sighting from October 2018, with the witness being a former pilot, witnessed a spherical orange glowing craft which moved silently across the skies of University Palace. The movements, bizarrely were not akin to how a living creature would move as opposed to machinery. The Westfield Shopping Center footage, December 2014. Westfield Shopping Center, December 2014. And one last incident, we will look at what took place on the evening of 29th December 2014. At around 6 p.m. in the Vancouver region of Washington, an ex-member of the United States military would record the footage of the Westfield Shopping Center after they noticed 4 strange lights going on from dim to bright captured his attention. Knowing a member of his family, the person who submitted the video in the report had an interest in such incidents, he managed to capture several minutes of footage. Because of their close proximity to each other, as well as the way they moved, the witness quickly dismissed that they were approaching airplanes. Furthermore, if they were hovering or sticking airplanes, the altitude was much too low. He would estimate the object would between 5 and 10 miles from his location at the shopping center. They were to sight approximately 10 minutes in total. Not all of the sighting was filmed. Where does the Gross Mountain incident fit into all of this? If we return then back to the Gross Mountain episode, where does it fit within the plethora of UFO sightings, this part of the United States, as well as within the surge of such incidents following regularly early part of the 1950s? While there is no proof of nuts and bolts UFOs in the skies, American-Canada border area in the afternoon of the 12th February 1954, given that we know of such incidents, including just how many UFO sightings take place in the state of Washington, is not at all a stretch of the imagination to think that would ultimately lead the young man to his death that morning was an intercept mission as opposed to a pilot error or an instrument checking. Instrument checking. Not due to him checking his instruments and stuff, or an instrument checking mission. Pretty much like that. As we will examine in a moment, it would appear that such a fatal UFO incident as the Gross Mountain crash. They really expect us to all do the instrument checking. That's I can't believe they would say that. As we will examine in a moment, it would appear that such a fatal UFO that happened at Gross Mountain crash was quite a regular occurrence in the late 1940s and early 50s. What happened to change that? Is there, as we have asked when we have touched on the UFO wave of 1954 previously, a connection to the alleged meeting between President Eisenhower and, depending on the source, two different alien races, or 2 different races of aliens. Was there an example, a deal reached at the claim of state which resulted in such a tragic aerial fatalities involving these strange and otherworldly crafts from happening at least with such a regularity? Even more disturbing, at least according to some researchers, certainly something that we should perhaps think about very carefully, are the claims that the deaths of such pilots as Lamar Barlow, a consequence of interaction with consequence of interaction with extraterrestrial crafts. And further still, the military or aspects of it not only knew such information but actively covered it up. More secrets still to surface. Is there still information or secret files to surface regarding the alleged UFO involvement of the failed crash of Lamar Barlow? We should perhaps remember that, like the Ken Ross incident and the feelings of at least some of the families of two deceased pilots, there was a distinct effort to hide the truth regarding the circumstances of the deaths. There were very similar claims of, sorry about laughing there. I was just, God, like they expect people not to be enraged or basically, not to look at this and say, these guys encountered aliens, especially because they were trying to hide the evidence of how these guys died, from even their own families. Not giving their families any kind of solace in the fact of knowing how their loved ones died. No, they had to muck up the waters and basically, or even do other things to basically make sure no actual information on what actually happened was let out to the general population. Great. Just because they didn't want people to know about aliens. There were very similar claims, at least from some quarters, concerning the Muntel incident, arguably the first serving Air Force pilot whose death, Albert, unofficially was connected directly to a UFO sighting. That each of the pilots involved in these other incidents all met their ends seemingly very similar circumstances, perhaps very telling. What's more, these types of situations are not all limited to the United States. We have examined, for example, several similar incidents alleged to have taken place off the coast of the United Kingdom, all were in remarkably similar circumstances. Perhaps we should ask if there are such incidents merely defensive, or might there be even now a more sinister and secretive reality of these outlandish but unnervingly intriguing incidents? And just what is the nature of that really? How much of the official version of such encounters is close to the true timeline of events? Check out the video below. It looks at Eisenhower interview incident in a little more detail. Whatever it did take, because the plane of the Lamar Barlow, did cause the plane of Lamar Barlow to go heading into this rocky, snowy mountain. Whatever did cause the plane of Lamar Barlow to go heading into the rocky, snowy mountainside is certainly up for debate. Which is that the state of Washington, indeed, at least on occasion, the Canadian region of British Columbia, similarly in sympathy with it, is awash with bizarre, unsettling, and seemingly otherworldly activity. Okay, we can take a look at that video, but I don't want to get copyright struck. So that's also very strange there. Maybe look at a few more UFO stories. Deadly UFO experience of the sixth kind. Let's see. It might be too long. I want to finish this video with something maybe a bit shorter. Resuming the first chase. The Belgian UFO wave. How long is this one? Maybe I'll look at a bit of this story, and maybe I'll cover a bit of it tomorrow, or maybe we'll look at how stories people have mentioned that I should look at. The wave of UFO sightings that took hold of Belgium between November 1989 and April 1991 is truly one of the most remarkable moments in UFO history. What's more, the sightings would result over 2,000 incident reports, most of these meticulously detailed in nature, for there's still over 650. The 650 accounts were subject to investigation. 500 remained unexplained. Everything about the Belgian UFO wave suggests legitimate signs of something completely unknown. So much so would be the authorities themselves who would push for thorough investigations. Indeed, the Belgian authorities showed quite clearly that the country's populace would and did act with calm and rational foresight in the face of events quite irrational and bizarre. Much like the Coursefield incident 3 years later, the final determinations of the authorities quite clearly suggest a phenomenon that desperately requires further investigation. And this particular wave of sightings would produce tangible, albeit small evidence to not only support its own claims, but those of other sightings across the planet. Yip in Belgium, November 89. A little after 5:30 p.m., November 1989, in the town of Eupen, a patrolling police would inform their switchboard operator, Albert Kreutz, of a huge airborne object, however, hovering over a field in front of them. According to their report, it was so bright it was flying up the field like a football stadium. Kreutz, given that it was almost Christmas, returned with a grip that it might be Saint Nick. However, the on-site officers urged him to go to the top floor of the building and look out the window to see for himself. Realizing the report was not a prank by his colleagues, he did so as suggested. Once there, he could see the mammoth craft looking like a boat floating in the sky. By this time, Chevitz was back in position at the switchboard. Residents were swamping the system with calls of strange bright objects. When police officer Dieter Plums and his partner made their report of visual contact with the craft, yeah, how can you not see that? And even the switchboard operator saw it. A big metal craft like that, just there in the sky. Kreutz told him to follow it. They did so for several minutes before it came to a stop and hovered over a retirement home. They too stopped their vehicle and watched the bizarre scene unfold in front of them. The object was a distinct triangle with 3 orange-brown lights. Each corner in the middle of the underside was a bright red light that flashed at regular intervals. At regular intervals, as Plums and his partner looked on in a small drone-like object left the craft. Left the craft, constantly flashing in unison with the middle light above. It surveyed the area before rejoining the triangle, which then left with great elasticity. 13 reports of signs would have come from police officers alone that evening. Over 60 more would come from citizens. Okay, mass media interest. By early December, the signs were not only national news, the world's press turned their attention to them. All described the same object, triangular with 3 orange lights, a middle red light at the evening of the 11th going into 12th. Another surge of signs occurred. One of these signs took place over the skies of Energe. The witness was an experienced Army Colonel, Andre Armand. While driving to the train station to pick up their son, Armand and his wife would notice the 3 bright sights set out like a triangle, a pulsating red light. Between them, this guy here would bring his car to a halt in order to get a better view. As he did so, the triangular craft would slowed also. He repeated this several times, each time the craft slowing with him. It then went in there to a nearby woodland. Armand followed it, eventually pulling his car over near an open field. There, from behind the trees, came the brightly lit airborne behemoth. Armand would report that he could hear other traffic and even a nearby train, but no sound whatever came from this huge ship. Just as he was about to leave, the craft shot away at speed. Armand would later state that no man-made object is able to do what I saw that object do that day. Not then and still not now. Other signs would pour in from the general public. Numerous residents of Lamar would report seeing a triangular craft over their house. One particular man, Japel Surmus, claimed... how about Jim? Claimed to witness a glowing object. Nearby woodland striking to free itself over a spruce tree. He was so close he could see the symbols of electrons on its side. All right. The apparent pros and cons of SOBIPs, the apparent pros and cons. The Belgian Society for the Study of Space Phenomenon, otherwise known as SOBIPS, was allegedly the largest UFO organization in Belgium when the waves began. However, as more and more reports continued to come in from the public, they almost became central to the investigation of the wave in general. For example, after they would interview the witness, they would often speak to the local and national media with quotes from what they had said being carried in various publications. In this way, at least, as events were unfolding, they were mouthpieces of Belgian wave. However, as the reports increased, so did the demand for this service, so much so that more and more investigators were recruited by the organization. This, at least in theory, often used by skeptics, perhaps decreased overall the competency and accuracy of the investigators somewhat. And as we shall see shortly, this would make accusations of leading the media astray against the organization from such skeptics a little easier for some to subscribe to. That said, however, the organization perhaps managed to compile one of the most detailed and documented records of UFO wave, and though somebody accused the organization of monopolizing the situation, those records may prove to be invaluable. Official procedures. The sightings would continue around Belgian airspace by the 21st of December. Official reporting procedures were communicated to the public. First, they would report the sightings to the police. Once the police had confirmed it, a radar station would be notified, one that had the authority to launch standby F-16 fighter jets to intercept. Although it wasn't public knowledge immediately, July 1990, NATO press conference was revealed F-16 fighter jets had been launched at 30th of March of that year. General Wilford D. Brough would talk of the considerable amount of press through the tapes of one of the F-16's flight. At one point, the triangular craft was traveling at over 1,000 knots. Further to this, it showed the capability to go from 150 knots to 100 knots in a matter of seconds. Ultimately, the craft vanished at a breathtaking pace. At this point, it's perhaps worth examining the jet crash in a little more detail. March 1990, a chase with UFOs. The incident in question began at 11 p.m. on the evening 30th. A Grand Mirror MDL, Mr. Rankin, would place a phone call from his home to the control reporting center. He would claim that he could see three unusual lights which were moving in the direction of Thermobras. He would report it was clear that the lights were fixed in an underside of a triangular object, and what's more, they were definitely not stars or planets. He would further claim that the lights were changing color, including green, red, and yellow lights. The control reporting center would dispatch patrol units to Rankin's property so that they could see the objects for themselves. By 11:10 p.m., Rankin reported that another set of lights in a triangular shape had moved into view. Joining the first set at the same time, the control reporting center, unknown object on their systems. The patrol unit would arrive in the Rankin property just at 11:30 p.m. They quickly confirmed the strange lights, and one of these present was Captain Pinson. He stated in his report back to the control reporting center that the color changes continually, although the prevailing color was red. Lights would change color to blue, white, yellow, and green, although they didn't appear to follow any particular order or pattern. As the patrol unit and Rankin continued to observe the lights, the control reporting center continued to monitor the strange anomaly on the radar systems. A second confirmed radar sighting came from the traffic control center shortly before midnight. 11:56 p.m., the order was given to launch military fighters at an intercept mission. Looking up to the air from the ground. During the first several minutes of the 31st March, a total of 9 separate intercepts attempting F-16s. It's the same. This is the same story. I'm going to end my live stream now. I think we've been at this for a good while. I think I'll end it. Maybe I'll get back to this article, or maybe I'll do another one tomorrow. Talk about what and basically look at all of those. Look at those stories that people, we'll be looking at more UFO stories tomorrow, folks. So maybe I'll get back to this, or maybe I'll do another one. But I'm going to thank you all for joining me tonight for the Scumdogs Kennel. Please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics They're Bad For You. There is misspelled. It's T-H-E-R-E. It's Read Comics They're Bad For You. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that like button because it helps me fight the algorithm so more people can see my content. As well as please go share this video on Twitter and Facebook and Gab. As well as leave some comments down below. I love to hear from you guys. As well as hit that bell and hit the part of the bell for all future notifications for my videos. All right, anything else? Make sure to hit that like button because it helps me fight the algorithm. Also, please go over to Stitch Together Pics. Stitch Together Pics is a YouTube channel that deserves far more subscribers. It has a great host, and he plays a character you're going to love. The character has multiple personalities, so you're getting a bunch of characters all doing one hell of a great story. You're going to love his reviews of movies and his of movies and stuff like that. He does some great ones that stitch together picks, as well as go over and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. Creepy Little Book is like the Art Bell radio show. He does live stream. He does live streams every night, and he live streams on weekdays at 12:30 a.m. and on weekends at 10 o'clock p.m. and at 3 o'clock and stuff like that. So go and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. He talks about aliens and ghosts, and you learn so much. As well as please go over to rumble.com and subscribe to my Rumble channel. The name of my channel on Rumble is Comic Freak. As well as go over to BitChute and subscribe to my BitChute channel. It is also named Comic Freak. All right. Anything else to talk about? I'm going to thank you all for joining me. And remember, I'll be back again tomorrow around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, 8 or 10 for another live stream. So be sure to come back again then and stuff. We had some fun tonight, huh? We looked at some alien stories. We learned so much tonight, and we're going to learn. And I had a lot of fun today. But don't worry, folks. I'll be back again tomorrow with another live stream. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll see you all again soon. Shall I leave it there, folks? All right. Maybe I should say it one more time. A little better this time. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining me. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. There, that sounds a bit better.